February 11. Jocelyn's Gamble. Jocelyn ran, drawing breath in burning gasps, listening for the beat of heavy wings. She'd trespassed in the frozen ruins of long-dead Karkoram and now fled alone. The rest of her team had fallen to a flurry of teeth and claws at an ill-chosen campsite, but she had insisted on camping alone, on an empty ledge far from the fire's protective light. That had spared her from the initial attack. Unfortunately, her companion's cries had drawn the attention of the citadel's keepers, and her ledge had not been sheltered enough to protect her from their eyes. She'd risked a single-story drop to the ground and survived, limping quickly into the shadows, but not quickly enough. Ahead of her lay the citadel's walls and the gap the guardians had not yet found. Jocelyn paused in the shadows, holding her breath as she listened, her eyes straining to see beyond the dark. When she heard and saw nothing and her thundering heart told her all was clear, she limped cautiously forward, using every scrap of cover she could find to reach the hole in the wall. Only when she had reached the other side and started down the slope did she dare to breathe a sigh of relief. She'd made it to the shelter of the trees and stopped in the deepest shadow. Cut! She made it to the shelter of the trees and stopped in the deepest shadow, looking back to make sure her trail was clear. She stayed long enough to catch her breath. When she was breathing quietly again, she slipped away to the trail, determined to walk the remainder of the night to reach the safety of Pelora's hut, the way station that serviced the trade route below. Once she thought she heard a sound behind her and hastened her steps. The sound hastened also, growing louder until Jocelyn stopped and turned to face whatever it was that pursued her through the dark. To her surprise, the trail lay empty. Jocelyn studied it and then turned slowly around, ready to resume her journey. The solidity of the creature barring her way stopped her in her tracks, and she bounced off its stone-hard chest to land on her ass at its feet. "We wondered how you'd been coming and going," the gargoyle said, as Jocelyn scrabbled back from it. The rock-hard solidity that met her back made her freeze. "You do know the penalty for trespass in Karkoram's wall, do you not?" And Jocelyn felt her innards turn to ice. She knew it. Staring up at the monster's face, she wanted to tell it she was sorry, that she'd never trespass again, that really there was nothing to be said. They all knew that. It held out its hand. "Come," it said, and Jocelyn stood without touching its hand. It smiled and reached out, capturing her wrist in its grip. "What did you take?" it asked, and she shook her head, trembling. She had taken nothing, only guided in would-be treasure hunters for a fee. A fee? Its grip tightened. Tell me why. Why she would risk becoming a Goritzic slave for a mere fee? Yes, and Jocelyn realized it was in her mind. To pay a debt, she whispered, knowing it would ferret out the details for itself. Her brother might have been a fool and an asshole, but he was still her brother. "He'll be free by morning," the Goritzic told her. "What he does with that freedom is on him alone. Agreed?" Jocelyn nodded, and then realized they needed the words. "Agreed. Which means you have no other obligations and are debt-free, correct?" "Correct." "Save to us," it added, and she nodded, staring at the ground at her feet. But silence was not enough, and it persisted. "Correct?" Its hand tightened on her wrist when she did not reply. "Correct?" Jocelyn felt bones shift. "Correct," she said, failing to keep the pain from her voice. The grip loosened, and she snuck a look at the monster's face. It reached out with its other hand and caught her chin in its hand, turning its head this way and that as it examined her. "You will make a fine servant," it said, and Jocelyn looked away. "How long?" she managed, her voice dry with fear and dismay. "How long?" it repeated, and she nodded. I took nothing save a fee, she added, and its face took on a crafty look. But you enabled others to escape, and not all of them went away empty handed. Your fee does not render you innocent. This much was true, and Jocelyn felt her heart sink. The Gritzik didn't seem to notice. We will discover who they are, and then calculate what percentage of the price can be attributed to you. On that will your years with us be based. Think of it as an adventure, the other added, his words echoing her brother's just before he'd stepped outside the law and been incarcerated until she could pay his debt. Personally, she thought he'd gotten the better end of the deal.